Hey everybody, Mags here. We are going to review some of the hints and tips that we've been given this year on the Dynasty Hotseat. If you are new here, do me a favor, can you like, comment, share on this video for me, please, like you can see here. And then also, if you're new here, why not hit that subscribe button too? It really helps out. Right, on to the hints and tips.
Yeah, so for me, I know you said most people do about 3. I came up with about 4. So the
Sweet.
first one for me is just kind of take the best player available, regardless of position or what you deem to be the best player available, because maybe you think Sky Moore is a lot more valuable than somebody else does in Dynasty too, and you're willing to take him a little bit earlier, like myself. I would do that. But I mean, I recently just did a startup, and for me personally, like, I don't value running backs very much at all in Dynasty, especially right now, just because like where we're at with running back landscape and Dynasty. A lot of these starters are kind of hitting that age cliff where they're 26, 27, and those guys, that's typically where it starts to fall off. You're thinking of guys like Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, like that whole class there, which was that really loaded running back class, is all now getting old. So eventually you're going to have to come in and like even some of these younger guys, it's like, well, Najee's already 24, so it's like, when's his cliff going to actually be too? Is it going to be a little bit later because he didn't have as many touches at Alabama early, or is it going to still be, like 27? So I think that's kind of interesting. And then the fact that the running backs are coming in. So in that draft, I actually went through and I started 4 wide receivers. And I took a couple quarterbacks in there too. I didn't take a single running back till rounds 11 and 12. So I ended up with Kareem Hunt and Ramondre Stevenson, who are 2 guys that I like targeting a lot there because they have the ability to go up. And then you get into later rounds and you can grab guys like a guy like Khalil Herbert, who's still really young. David Montgomery's on the last year of his deal, and we already seen that he could do it at the NFL level. And the thing that really surprised me with him is like watching the film and everything. He's a shifty back, and they used him on like wide zones and stuff like that at Virginia Tech. But last year with the Bears, he really ran in between the tackles a lot better than he ever did in college. So he's shown the ability to do it. So guys like that, I like taking the upside on. And especially like with running backs, it just takes one injury and then their value goes up. And then even if you're not going to keep them long term, you can still flip them for something too. So that's kind of the biggest one for me, is just the best player available regardless of position. And that league that I'm talking about actually is kind of interesting because it's the tight end premium, but you don't have to start a tight end. So in that league, like, I'm not even drafting tight ends just because, like, if you don't get, like, tight end premium makes it more valuable to have tight ends, but if you don't have a good one, you still don't have a good one. You're just kind of stuck in the middle, and if you don't have to start one, you're still better off starting a wide receiver or whatever. So just figuring out what you value and building that position of strength, because especially in Dynasty, you want position of strength, because at some point in time you're gonna have to trade with somebody, like, no matter how good you think your team is.
Yeah, absolutely like that. I mean, just the draft, always say, you got to draft for your talent and then trade for the need, right? Don't really worry too much about building this like super depth in different positions. Just take, that's always I said, just take the best player that's there, and then you can actually just use those guys as well. You might almost sometimes even draft somebody that you've got no intention of ever playing them. You're like, I'm going to draft this guy because he's the most value, and then I'm going to trade him. And then I'm going to fill any other holes using the value from that person. So, I really like that. Draft the best player available, not only because it makes your team, littered with better players, but also you got more value and you got more chips on your side that you can use to trade. So, Craig, I love that as a first tip. So you got 3 more for us. Very excited. We got still 3 more.
Even on that last, I was gonna say, even on that last point too, like if we just talk about a guy like Sky Moore real quickly, he's essentially the only Chiefs wide receiver that's guaranteed to be on the team next year. So like MVS has the fakest 3-year contract ever. Like, they can cut him next year and save like $7 million or $7.5 million. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. So if he's just bad, they just cut him. McCollum's on the last year of his deal. Juju's on a 1-year deal. Josh Gordon's not going to be around. Like, he's the only guy guaranteed to be there next year. So the guys like that, the situations that can get better is approved to, like say if you compare him to like a Darnell Mooney, it's like Mooney's got a lot of targets guaranteed this year, but they almost have to draft another wide receiver at some point. You'd think
so. You could never really trust what they're going to do with that, right? You never know what's going to happen. But I think you're completely right with Sky Moore there. He's one of my favorite people to target right now.
And then my next one would just be don't get stuck in the middle. So figure out where your team's at. Are you competing? Are you rebuilding? Because like the worst thing you can do is be like the Vikings and go 8-8 every year. Like it's not what you want to do, especially in Dynasty, because you're not making money that way. You might get lucky every
No,
once or you might get lucky once every 6 years and get third place, and you're just maybe
yeah,
getting your money back or a little bit more than that, but like that's not paying
yeah,
for it at the end of the day. So
no,
take a hard look at your team. There's plenty of good resources out there if you do not know how to evaluate your own dynasty
yeah.
team. Dynasty Nerds has I don't remember what the heck they call it now. It's like the
The
My GM
Dynasty
score.
GM.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's like
excellent. Yeah,
yeah, and I was listening to them break that down at the expo, and like
yeah,
there's so much layers in that. Like even if you just go try it out and try to figure out where your team's at for this year, you can go sign up for
yeah.
like 1 month, and it's like somewhere between $5 and $8. Is that worth it to figure
It's
out what
so
your team
cheap.
is? Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
like just figure out where you're at. Kind of look at the resources that you do have. Is your team on that aging cliff where you got Derrick Henrys and Tyreek
mm,
Hills and guys that are getting a little bit older and going to fall off eventually? Is Aaron Rodgers your main quarterback and you don't know if he's going to retire next year? Figure out
yeah,
where you're at. Are you pushing all the chips in, or are you kind of pulling back and trading off some of your pieces, building up some future assets? And I think part of that too is what people, it's always like draft picks, draft picks too. Like people always want to trade for that. Well, sometimes if you get a draft pick and a young player that you think has a chance of some upside, that works out all right too.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think that is maybe like the most important like thing for dynasty is like you don't want to be in the middle is bad, and like I would much rather come last because then I get a better pick next year, and then
Mm.
I'm way more likely to be contending again sooner if I get the 101 pick or I get the 102 pick. I'm getting a much better player than I would at the 106, right, or the 107, where I'm just sitting in the middle and not really ever making my team any better. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of that. Is looking honestly at team, deciding can I win, and the more excuses you have to make for your team before you can say you can win, then the more likely it is that you need to sell some of these assets off, sell the old guys, sell the running backs as soon as you can.
Mhm.
Keep maybe like your younger receivers, but yeah, get rid of the older guys, get rid of the running backs, and start again. I think that's always good advice. So I love that as tip number 2. And you got a third tip for us there, Craig?
Yeah, so even with those running backs, though, like in Dynasty or running backs, I'm like, I'll draft them when they're rookies and trade them away when they get value. Just keep doing that over
Yep.
and over and over again, because
Yep.
otherwise, like, it's so expensive to get a running back. Like, unless you really need one. Like even last year, I had Derrick Henry go down in one league, and I was trying to trade for running backs, and it was like, even just like for Chase Edmonds, people were trying to get like a first round pick. I'm just like, no.
It's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But then part of the last one kind of goes into the next one too. So
Mhm.
for me, it's target one draft class and load up on picks in that draft class. So if
Yes.
so maybe this was 2 years ago and you're looking at 2023 and you're like, hey, this is going to be a draft class. I'm going to try to get as many picks early in this draft class as I can. I did this in a startup actually a couple of years ago where I didn't actually make a pick till the 4th round, but I just kept trading back, and loading up on picks. So I ended up with
Nice.
11. End up with 11 of the first 18, 11 of the first 16 or 18. I can't remember off the top of my head picks in the draft. So my quarterbacks were already kind of set just because I had like Matt Stafford, Kirk Cousins, and Jalen Hurts. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
and this was, the Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones and Justin Fields year and all that. So
Yeah.
everybody else is kind of taking quarterbacks, and I'm just like, okay, I'll take Najee, I'll take Javante Williams, I took Travis Etienne, like I'll take Waddle, I'll
Yeah.
take Devontae Smith, like because I had
Woo.
8 first-round picks or whatever. So it's just like,
Yeah.
and if you do that too, you don't have to just diversify your assets because you have so many different ones that
Yeah.
somebody's bound to hit out of that group. If you take 8 guys,
Yeah.
2 or 3 are probably going to hit, even if 5 of them don't hit at all. Um,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
even then with that, like I picked all 3 running backs, and then somebody really wanted Travis Etienne, so I went ahead and I just traded him like straight up for DJ Moore,
Mm.
which and then Etienne got hurt, so it looked pretty good looking
And then
back.
you're
So,
like, yeah.
uh,
I think the longer like sort of your scope is for I'm gonna go for that class. Like for example, I've been the past 3 years getting 2023 picks because I knew that was going to be a good class. And it's so easy. Like, think about how easy it is right now to get a 2025 pick. right? Because it's so far away, people are more willing to give it away. So 3 years ago, it was easier to get a 2023 pick. So I was just like, give me the 23 picks, give me the 23 picks as much as possible, to the point where like people will offer me a 22 first. And I'm like, can you just give me a 23 first? And they're like, oh, yeah, sucker. I'm like, nah, well, joke's on you. Let's find out next year. So, yeah, I think setting that target for the further back you can set it, the further back you can hear a good draft class is coming, then aim for them right away and start targeting them right away, because that's the value just goes up and up and up with every day the closer it gets to that draft class. So yeah, I think that's a great tip there. I'm sorry I interrupted you during your next one.
No, you're good. So the next one I just had was kind of don't fall in love with players too, like especially like last year, like you pick up Marquez Callaway off of waivers, or you get him late in the pick, and somebody offers you a second round pick for it. Just take it. Like, and it goes into this year. You got Romeo Dobbs, however you want to pronounce his last name now. He, without going on a whole rant, he was one of my least favorite wide receiver prospects in this whole entire thing, just because there's so much stuff he didn't do well at Nevada. Like, yeah, he won on a bunch of 9 routes against a bunch of, Mountain West corners that ran 4.7s. Cool. But, but like you draft him in the first, or you draft him in the 4th round of a rookie draft. And if somebody's offering you a 2023 second round pick for it, you should probably just take it already. Like, Aaron Rodgers has already come out and said he doesn't want this guy to start. He wants Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, and Allen Lazard to start. He's already on the record of saying that. Granted, 2 of those guys are probably going to get hurt this year because they have a long history of doing it.
Yeah, Sammy Watkins is probably hurt right now, right? We just don't know, right?
Well, actually, he's out there right now. He already got over his hurt part so far in camp. But at the same time, Christian Watson also has higher draft capital. He is coming back. He had a knee scope. It wasn't anything major. It's a similar one to that I had in my own career, playing high school football, but a little bit different there. But, I've been through that process too, and he should be good. Like, he might not be fully 100% by week 1, but he took the opportunity and said, hey, this has been bothering me. He could have just played all year on it and kind of had it bother him and maybe turns into something worse, or had the surgery and they went and kind of scoped it, just cleaned off some stuff on the meniscus, everything like that. Nothing major. So he's back at camp now. If he starts gelling with Rodgers, if he starts looking good, then he's probably going to get at him, and they have more incentive to play him because he does have the higher draft capital. And then without going down too far the rabbit hole, they also drafted Samori Torrey out of Nebraska, who I really like, who's a lot more versatile player. He can play inside, he can play outside, he can run a plethora of routes, and he's a lot faster than Romeo Doubs too, even though if you look at their 40 times and everything, it's only like 0.2, 0.02 or 0.04, but like the dude outran the whole Ohio State defense last year at Nebraska. So
so it's field speed versus track speed. The speed is different, right?
But pretty much just don't fall in love with players like a Romeo Doubs. And Isaiah Pacheco is a really popular one now. A lot of people are taking shots. I was
going to bring him up.
If somebody's giving you a second round pick for him next year, just take it. Like, especially like when we look at next year's draft class, it should be really good on paper. And I think there's probably 6 to 8 guys that we probably know that are going to be first round picks for Dynasty next year, pretty much for sure. Then you add in the fact, if some of these other quarterbacks start hitting, if Will Levis takes the next step up, if he gets first round draft capital in the NFL, he's going in the first round. If Anthony Richardson actually proves himself and does something at Florida, not sure that's going to happen, but
But there's always these guys that's like a Joe Burrow, for example, right? That kind of just takes that big step forward, comes out of like not quite out of nowhere, but takes this massive step forward, and all of a sudden, they're in the first round. I didn't even see that coming, right?
We've seen it 3 years in a row now. So we had Joe Burrow, and then Zach Wilson was the next year, but Zach Wilson did have a really good freshman year. A lot of NFL scouts were watching him then. He played banged up his sophomore year, didn't look as good, and then he came back out and he looked really good, and he kind of popped back up on the radar. And then last year we saw with Kenny Pickett. Nobody really thought Kenny Pickett was like, if he would have came out the year before, he was a 6th, 7th round pick. And the same thing with Joe Burrow. If he came out the year before, he was a 6th, 7th round pick. He goes back for the extra COVID year, lights the world on fire, and ends up as a first round pick. Whether or not he should have been is another question, but hey, that's the way it was. And that's the way last year's draft class was. So for quarterback. So we'll see how, and we'll take that going forward too, to see if that's a common theme, if teams are starting to devalue these quarterbacks that they don't view as high end, or maybe they don't have as high end traits, but we'll see how that all shakes out. I think there's a lot of guys that could pop up into the first round this year, but I also think there's a lot opportunities that they all kind of fall apart like last year, because that's the same thing we saw last year. Is we saw everybody's like, oh, if Matt Corral takes the next step, if Malik Willis takes the next step, if Sam Howell does, and Sam Howell was left out to dry at North Carolina, but that's without going too far down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's a bit of a it's a mixed bag a lot of the time, right? And it's just that's why it is important, like, not to fall in love with a player too much, because the NFL is like a complete mixed bag as well. Like, you look at people like Baker Mayfield 2 years ago at the Browns, untouchable, like a quarterback of a generation for them, and now he's not even on the team. Like, it moves so fast. So don't fall in love with players too much, because it can come and bite you and take the value while it's there. Absolutely agree. And was that your third tip or your fourth tip, Craig?
Well, that was my fourth. But even on that quarterback point too, I'll just say NFL teams want to have a top 8 quarterback in the league on their team. That's how they view it. And if you're not that guy, they're just going to move on from you. It doesn't matter if you're number 14. They're just, and we've seen it time and time and time again. Unless you offer something extra and you're that number 14, they're probably just going to move on from you. And teams get, like we saw with San Francisco, with them drafting Trey Lance. They're drafting the upside instead of going with the proven known commodity that is Jimmy G, because they're like, hey, but we've seen it with that franchise before when they went from Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick too. So different regimes, different everything like that too. But there's also, we see it more and more often at the NFL level.
Exactly.
And you see teams constantly chasing like, if you don't have a quarterback, you're probably not winning. We saw the Broncos after Peyton Manning retired, quarterback, and none of these guys worked out. Now they just go, okay, we'll take Russell. We'll just go all in on Russell Wilson instead. But even with, I will say one name to potentially look out for next year's quarterback class could be Dylan Gabriel. He was at Central Florida. He had the first 2 years were really good. Aired the ball out a ton there. Last year gets hurt, transfers to Oklahoma now, which Oklahoma is a little bit depleted, but it's also a bigger program. So if he goes out, he throws 4,000 yards at Oklahoma, all of a sudden everybody starts talking about him. I'm not sure he ever gets to a first round draft pick, but there's a chance he gets up to the second round. He's a little bit undersized too, but he was one of those guys. He came out like a high school in Hawaii too and everything, but could be interesting.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. Remember, like this video, leave a comment if you want, and subscribe to the channel. These videos are going to be coming thick and fast, so you don't want to miss anything. So that's it for today. In the meantime, keep yourselves, keep your teams lit. We'll see you next time.